Have you ever wondered how an entire sea could part in two? Picture this: Moses, a humble shepherd turned leader, guiding a multitude of Israelites out of Egypt. They had been trapped in a life of hardship and servitude, but hope was on the horizon. Their journey, however, was far from easy. As they neared the Red Sea, they found themselves between a rock and a hard place. Pharaoh's mighty army was hot on their trail, and before them, the Red Sea spread out, vast and seemingly impassable. Can you imagine the fear that must have gripped their hearts? The uncertainty, the anticipation? But Moses, their leader, held firm. He had faith. With the Israelites at his back and the sea in front, Moses did something extraordinary. He raised his staff high into the air, and then a miracle unfolded. The sea, once a barrier, parted in two, revealing a path of dry ground that stretched from one shore to the other. Imagine their astonishment as walls of water rose up on either side, held back as if by an unseen hand. The Israelites, once trapped, now had a clear path to freedom. They crossed the sea, every man, woman, and child on dry ground. But the story doesn't end there. The Egyptian army, in their arrogance, pursued them onto the seabed. But as the last of the Israelites reached the other side, the sea returned. The waters rushed back in, drowning the entire Egyptian army. This was no ordinary event. This was a demonstration of faith, of divine intervention. It was a moment that would be etched in the annals of history, a tale of a people's liberation from bondage. Imagine the awe and relief the Israelites must have felt. Their journey was far from over, but for now they were safe. They had crossed the sea, witnessed a miracle, and lived to tell the tale. And all this under the watchful eye and guiding hand of Moses, their shepherd, their leader, their liberator. What if your food fell straight from the sky? Imagine, if you will, a vast desert stretching as far as the eye can see. Now picture a large group of people, the Israelites, journeying across this barren landscape. Their stomachs are growling, their lips are parched, their spirits are low. They are hungry, tired, and starting to grumble. In the midst of their despair, they begin to voice their complaints. They long for the meals they used to have in Egypt, despite the harsh conditions they lived under. They question their leaders, Moses and Aaron, doubting the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, let's shift our gaze upwards towards the heavens. Picture a response from the divine, a solution to the Israelites' plight. From the sky, food begins to descend. Not just any food, but manna and quail. Manna, a type of bread, and quail, a small plump bird. The sight of these falling from the sky must have been a spectacle to behold. The Israelites must have been amazed, their eyes wide with surprise and their mouths watering at the sight of this heavenly feast. Every morning, like clockwork, the manna would appear. It was described as small, round, and white, like frost on the ground. The Israelites would gather it, grind it, and bake it into loaves. It was said to taste like honey wafers, a sweet and satisfying meal to start the day. In the evening, flocks of quail would cover the camp. The people would catch these birds and prepare them for a hearty dinner. A divine delivery service, providing sustenance for the hungry travelers in the middle of a desert. This wasn't just a one-time occurrence. No, this was a daily provision. Every day for 40 years, God provided manna and quail for the Israelites. A constant reminder of his care and provision for his people, even in the most challenging circumstances. Wouldn't it be exciting to find your dinner waiting for you outside every morning? Indeed, the story of manna and quail from heaven is a testament to the extraordinary ways in which help can come, even in the most unlikely of places. What if you were asked to explore a land flowing with milk and honey? Picture this: Moses, the leader of the Israelites, sends 12 spies to tour Canaan, a land promised to them by God himself, a place described as flowing with milk and honey, a metaphor for its abundance and fertility. These 12 spies, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, set off on their mission with hearts full of anticipation and a dash of trepidation. For 40 days, they traverse this new land, their eyes wide with wonder at the richness they find. They see vineyards filled with the largest grapes they've ever seen, fields rippling with golden wheat, and olive groves stretching as far as the eye can see. But along with the abundance, they also encounter the inhabitants of Canaan, and they are intimidating, to say the least. The Canaanites are strong and numerous, their cities fortified and vast. The spies feel like grasshoppers before them. Upon their return, 10 of the spies report to Moses and the people, their voices quivering with fear. They tell tales of the land's abundance, but also of the formidable inhabitants, casting a shadow of fear and doubt among the Israelites. But 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, see things differently. They acknowledge the challenges, but they remember God's promise. They encourage the people, saying, "Do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." In the midst of fear, Joshua and Caleb choose to trust in God's promise. They show courage, not because they are unafraid, but because they choose to move forward despite their fear. They believe in a promise, a vision of a land flowing with milk and honey, a place for their people to call home. So always remember, even in the face of giants, trust and courage can lead the way. What would you do if your donkey started to talk? Imagine this, you're Balaam, happily riding your donkey on a journey. Suddenly the donkey veers off the path. You're frustrated, but then it happens again and again. You're upset, but you don't understand why your usually obedient donkey is acting so strange. Then, in the midst of your frustration, the unbelievable happens. Your donkey turns around and starts to talk. She tells you she's been seeing an angel blocking the path, an angel you can't see. You're stunned, of course. A talking donkey? An invisible angel? It's all a bit too much to take in. But let's pause for a moment here. This isn't just a story about a chatty donkey. It's about how sometimes God uses the most unexpected ways to get our attention. You see, Balaam was so focused on his journey that he didn't realize God was trying to communicate with him. It took a talking donkey to make him stop and listen. And when he finally did, he understood the message. The angel was there to stop him from making a big mistake. Balaam was heading down a dangerous path, and God, in his mercy, sent an angel to block his way. And when Balaam couldn't see the angel, God used the donkey to get his message across. Isn't that something? A humble donkey, not only able to see angels, but also gifted with speech just to save Balaam's life. It's a reminder that sometimes we need to slow down, listen, and be open to messages that might come from the most unexpected places. So, next time you're on your journey, remember Balaam and his donkey. Remember that sometimes God speaks to us in ways we might not expect. And most importantly, remember to listen. Because who knows? The message you need to hear might just come from the most surprising source. Next time your pet looks at you funny, maybe they have something important to say. Can you think of 10 rules that everyone should follow? In the heart of the story of Moses, there's a special moment when God gives Moses 10 such rules, known as the 10 Commandments. These were delivered atop Mount Sinai, a place of great significance and awe. The first commandment is, "You shall have no other gods before me." This means that we should always put God first in our lives. It's like when you're playing a team sport and everyone must focus on working together rather than seeking individual glory. The second commandment is, "You shall not make for yourself an idol." In simpler terms, this tells us not to worship objects or things, but to appreciate the world for its spiritual and moral values. It's like valuing a friendship for the joy it brings rather than the presents your friend might give you. The third commandment is, "You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God." This emphasizes the importance of respecting God's name and not using it lightly or disrespectfully. It's similar to how you wouldn't want someone to use your name in a mean or disrespectful way. The fourth commandment is, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." This means setting aside one day a week for rest and reflection, a pause from our busy lives. It's like taking a deep breath after a long run. Then comes the fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother. This means respecting our parents and their wisdom. It's like listening to the coach's advice during a game. Because they have more experience. The sixth commandment is, "You shall not murder." This one is pretty straightforward. It emphasizes the value of life and our duty to protect and respect it. It's like knowing that it's wrong to harm others, even in anger. The seventh commandment is, "You shall not commit adultery." This commandment talks about the importance of being faithful and honest in our relationships. It's like keeping a promise to a friend, always being there for them. The eighth commandment is, "You shall not steal." This tells us to respect other people's belongings. It's like knowing you shouldn't take your friend's toy without asking. The ninth commandment is, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." In other words, always tell the truth. It's like being honest when your mom asks who ate the last cookie. And finally, the 10th commandment is, "You shall not covet." This means we should be content with what we have and not desire what others have. It's like being happy with the toys you have rather than wanting your friend's toys. These 10 simple rules can guide us to be kind and respectful to each other. They serve as a reminder to treat each other well and appreciate the world around us. What do you think it would be like to see the land you've dreamed of, but not be able to enter it? Imagine standing atop a high mountain, your eyes scanning the horizon, and there it is, the Promised Land. This was the view that greeted Moses from Mount Nebo. Moses, a humble shepherd turned leader, had guided his people through the wilderness for 40 long years. He had been their rock in times of doubt, their beacon of hope in times of despair. A man of unwavering faith, he had led them through trials and tribulations, always with the vision of the Promised Land in his heart. Yet, as he stood there on Mount Nebo, he knew he would not set foot in the land flowing with milk and honey. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with the joy of seeing the culmination of a lifelong journey and the sorrow of knowing he would not be part of the next chapter. But Moses wasn't a man to wallow in self-pity. Instead, he turned his attention to Joshua, his faithful companion, and the man chosen to lead the people into the Promised Land. Moses was not just passing on the baton of leadership, but entrusting Joshua with the dreams and hopes of an entire nation. His last act was a testament to his selflessness and his faith in God's plan. Even in his final moments, Moses was a leader, ensuring his people were in good hands and their journey would continue. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the Promised Land, Moses closed his eyes for the last time. His journey had come to an end, but his legacy lived on. His faith, his leadership, and his unwavering commitment to his people were an inspiration to all who knew his story. Moses may not have entered the Promised Land, but his journey and leadership are remembered to this day. His story serves as a reminder that sometimes the journey is just as important as the destination. Once upon a time, a brave man named Joshua led his people to a new land. This tale begins with Joshua, a man of courage and unwavering faith who was chosen to guide his people, the Israelites, to a land promised to them by God, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of abundance and prosperity. Joshua, a humble servant, accepted this monumental task with grace and determination. He understood the weight of his responsibilities, and he knew that his people were relying on him. But Joshua was not alone. He had the power of faith and the strength of his people behind him. As the Israelites journeyed towards their destiny, they encountered a significant obstacle: the mighty Jordan River. It was flood season, and the river was wild and untamed. But Joshua, with his steadfast faith, didn't falter. He told his people, "Do not be afraid. Have faith, for God will guide us." And indeed, something miraculous occurred. As the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant stepped into the river's edge, the waters parted, creating a dry path through the river. It was a sight to behold, a testament to their faith and the power of their God. The Israelites walked through the riverbed, their hearts filled with awe and gratitude. Emerging on the other side of the river, they found themselves on the cusp of the Promised Land. It was a moment of triumph, a moment of unity. They had faced the mighty Jordan and had emerged victorious. Their journey was a testament to their faith, their unity, and their unwavering belief in God's promise. And the crossing of the Jordan was a significant milestone in their journey. It was a symbol of their transition from a life of hardship to a life of abundance, from a life of uncertainty to a life of promise. It was a symbol of their faith and their trust in God's promise. As they entered the promised land, they knew that their journey was far from over. They knew that there would be challenges ahead, battles to be fought, and victories to be won. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had their faith. Entering the promised land was not just about reaching a physical destination. It was about a journey of faith, a journey of unity, and a journey of transformation. It was about a people who, led by a brave man named Joshua, had the courage to dream of a better life, the faith to believe in God's promise, and the determination to make that dream a reality. And so, Joshua and his people entered the promised land, ready to start a new chapter in their lives. They had crossed the Jordan, they had walked through the riverbed, and now they were ready to claim the land that had been promised to them. It was a new beginning, a new chapter, a new story to be told. And it all began with a brave man named Joshua leading his people to a new land. In the new land, there was a big city called Jericho with tall walls around it. These walls were so high and so strong, they seemed utterly impenetrable. It was as if they were whispering a challenge to anyone who dared approach. "Try and conquer us if you dare." But the Israelites, led by Joshua, were not to be deterred. They had a mission, a divine mission, and they were ready to face the challenge head on. Now you might be thinking, how could they possibly bring down those massive walls? Well, here's where the story gets interesting. You see, they didn't use battering rams, catapults, or any other siege weapons you might be imagining. No, not at all. Their weapon of choice was their unwavering faith in God and obedience to His commands. One day, Joshua had a vision. In this vision, he was visited by a divine messenger who told him exactly what he needed to do. The instructions were clear and straightforward, but also quite unusual. For 6 days, Joshua and his army were to march around the city of Jericho once, with the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant and 7 priests blowing trumpets made of ram's horns. They were to do this in silence, with only the sound of the trumpets filling the air. Then, on the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times. But this time, at the end of the 7th round, when the priests blew their trumpets, everyone was to shout as loud as they could. Yes, you heard that right. They were to shout. This was not a battle strategy anyone had ever heard of before. But Joshua, trusting in God's plan, followed the instructions to the letter. So, for 6 days, the Israelites marched around the city just as they were told. The inhabitants of Jericho watched from their high walls, puzzled by this strange spectacle. Then came the 7th day. The Israelites made their rounds. The priests blew their trumpets, and then, as instructed, everyone shouted. They shouted with all their might, their voices echoing across the landscape. And guess what happened next? The impossible, the unimaginable. The walls of Jericho, those towering, intimidating walls, they came tumbling down, just like that. The city was laid bare, open for the taking. The Israelites, with their faith rewarded, charged into the city, capturing it as was promised to them. It was an incredible victory, achieved not through brute force, but through obedience, belief, and the power of their collective voice. And so, dear listeners, the story of the fall of Jericho is one of faith and obedience, of the power of collective action and the belief in the divine. It teaches us that no obstacle is too great, no challenge too daunting when we have faith and act in unity. With a great noise and the power of belief, the walls of Jericho fell, and the city was theirs. Now, let me tell you about a wise woman named Deborah. In a time when Israel was under the rule of Jabin, the king of Canaan, there arose a woman of wisdom, courage, and leadership. This woman was Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth. She was not only a wife and mother, but also a judge of Israel. Deborah would sit under a palm tree, known as the Palm of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And there, the Israelites would come to her for judgment. Deborah, being a prophetess, had a special connection with God. She could hear his voice and understand his will. When the Israelites were oppressed by the Canaanites, it was Deborah who heard God's command for a man named Barak to lead an army against them. However, Barak was hesitant and insisted that Deborah accompany him to the battle. Deborah agreed, but she prophesied that the honor of victory would not go to Barak but to a woman. Deborah's wisdom shone through her leadership. She knew that the battle against the Canaanites was not merely a physical one, but a spiritual one as well. She rallied the Israelites, reminding them of their strength and their faith in God. Under Deborah's leadership, 10,000 soldiers followed Barak to Mount Tabor to face Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army. The battle was fierce and the odds were against them. But Deborah did not waver. She encouraged Barak and his men, telling them that this was the day God had given into their hands. And as Deborah had prophesied, God confused Sisera and his chariots and army with a sudden storm, and they were defeated by Barak's forces. In the end, it was not Barak who ended the life of Sisera. Instead, it was Jael, a woman who was not a warrior, but had the courage to defeat Sisera while he was hiding in her tent. Thus, the honor of victory went not to a man, but to a woman, just as Deborah had prophesied. The victory over the Canaanites led to peace in the land of Israel for 40 years, and it was all thanks to the wisdom and leadership of a woman. Deborah was not just a leader, but a beacon of hope, encouraging her people to have faith and courage in the face of adversity. This story of Deborah reminds us of the power of wisdom, courage, and leadership. It shows us that anyone, regardless of gender, can lead people to victory if they have faith in God and the wisdom to follow his guidance. With Deborah's guidance, the people found victory. Remember, wisdom can lead us to great things. Have you ever heard about a man named Gideon? He was a true hero. In a time of great fear and uncertainty, Gideon emerged as a beacon of hope for his people. The Israelites were being oppressed by the Midianites, a formidable foe with a vast army. But Gideon, a man of humble beginnings, was chosen by God to lead the Israelites to victory. Gideon was initially doubtful. After all, he was from the weakest clan in Manasseh, and he considered himself the least in his family. However, God saw something in Gideon that he didn't see in himself. God saw a leader, a warrior, and above all, a man of unwavering faith. God gave Gideon a task to free the Israelites from the Midianites. But there was a twist. God told Gideon that his army was too large. It might seem strange, right? Usually in battles, the more soldiers, the better. But God had a plan. He wanted to show that victory was not by human strength alone, but by his divine power. So, Gideon sent home all but 300 of his men. Just imagine that. Gideon, with only 300 men, was to face an army as numerous as locusts. It was a daunting task, but Gideon trusted in God and prepared for battle. The night before the battle, God gave Gideon a sign. He told Gideon to sneak into the enemy camp. There, Gideon overheard a soldier talking about a dream that predicted their defeat by Gideon's hand. This bolstered Gideon's courage, and he returned to his camp, ready to face the Midianites. The battle strategy was unique. Each of Gideon's men held a trumpet and a jar with a torch inside. At Gideon's signal, they blew their trumpets, broke the jars, and revealed the torches. This created an illusion of a massive army, causing panic among the Midianites. They turned on each other in confusion, and the Israelites won without even having to fight. Gideon's victory over the Midianites was nothing short of miraculous. It wasn't about the strength of his army or his strategic genius, but his faith in God. He trusted God's plan even when it seemed impossible, and his faith led to victory. After the battle, the Israelites wanted to make Gideon their king, but Gideon refused, reminding them that only God was their king. His victory brought peace to the land for 40 years. The story of Gideon teaches us many lessons. It shows us that courage isn't about having the biggest army or the most powerful weapons. It's about having faith, even when the odds are against you. It's about trusting in God's plan, even when it doesn't make sense. Even against all odds, Gideon and his small army won, showing us that with faith and courage, anything is possible. Our last story is about a man with great strength named Samson and a woman named Delilah. In the time of the ancient Israelites, there lived a man named Samson, who was blessed with unimaginable strength. This strength, however, was not of his own making, but was a gift from God. But there was a catch. To maintain his strength, he had to follow certain rules, one of which was to never cut his hair. Now, Samson was not just a strong man, he was also a judge of Israel, and he used his strength to protect his people against their enemies, the Philistines. But even the strongest of men have their weaknesses, and for Samson, his weakness was his love for a Philistine woman named Delilah. Delilah was beautiful and captivating, and Samson was smitten. But Delilah had a secret. She was promised a great sum of money by the Philistine rulers if she could discover the source of Samson's strength and find a way to overpower him. Intrigued by the challenge, Delilah agreed. She tried time and time again to coax the secret from Samson, but he was careful not to reveal the true source of his strength. However, Delilah was persistent, and she used her charm to wear him down. Eventually, Samson gave in. He told Delilah that his strength lay in his uncut hair. With this information, Delilah waited until Samson was fast asleep. Then she called a man to cut off his hair. When she woke him up, his strength had vanished. He was captured by the Philistines, who gouged out his eyes and made him a slave. Yet Samson's story didn't end there. While in captivity, his hair began to grow back, and with it, his strength. In a final act of bravery, during a gathering of the Philistine rulers, Samson prayed to God for strength one last time. He pushed against the pillars of the temple where they were gathered, bringing it down upon them and himself. Samson's life was a tale of great power and great fall, a testament to the fact that even the mightiest can fall due to their weaknesses. But it was also a story of redemption and bravery, of how even in his last moments, Samson used his strength to protect his people. Samson's story teaches us that true strength comes from within, and we must be careful in whom we place our trust. All these stories have something special to tell us. Let's take a moment to reflect on the tales we've just journeyed through, each one of them a gem, imparting wisdom and life lessons. We started with the story of Joshua and the Israelites entering the Promised Land. It wasn't just about reaching a destination, it was about faith, courage, and unity. Joshua led his people across the Jordan River not on a bridge or a boat, but on dry ground. It was a demonstration of the incredible things that can happen when we trust in something bigger than ourselves and move forward together. The fall of Jericho, our next story, was a testament to perseverance and the power of faith. The walls of Jericho were formidable, but they were no match for the Israelites' unwavering belief and determination. They marched around the city for 7 days, and on the 7th day, with a great shout and the sound of trumpets, the walls came tumbling down. It was a clear lesson that no obstacle is too big when we are steadfast and have faith in our abilities and divine assistance. Then we turned our attention to Deborah, a wise and courageous woman who led God's people. She was a beacon of strength and justice, stepping up to lead when no one else would. Her story taught us about the importance of courage, wisdom, and leadership. It showed us that anyone, regardless of gender, can rise to the occasion and guide others towards the right path. Our fourth story was about Gideon, a humble man who, with God's guidance, overcame his fears and doubts to defeat the Midianites. Gideon's story was a classic tale of triumph over adversity. It reminded us that we should not let our insecurities hold us back. With a bit of courage and some divine guidance, we can conquer our fears and achieve great things. Finally, we delved into the story of Samson and Delilah, a tale of strength and vulnerability. Samson was the strongest man alive, yet he was vulnerable because of his love for Delilah. His story taught us about the balance between power and humility, and the importance of wisdom in choosing who to trust. Each of these stories, in their own unique way, has painted a beautiful picture of life's complexities. They have shown us the importance of faith, courage, perseverance, leadership, humility, and wisdom. They have taught us that we can overcome any obstacle if we believe in ourselves and in divine guidance. Remember, each story teaches us a valuable lesson about life. Keep these stories in your heart and they will guide you on your own journey.